The moment the woman stepped through the airport's automatic doors, something happened. Something so small, no one else noticed yet. Powerful enough to shift the fate of an entire airline. A check-in agent looked at her, frowned, then gave a tiny shake of the head, as if she had just spotted someone unworthy of standing anywhere near the priority lane. A single glance, an unspoken word, a bare-faced dismissal. And in that exact moment, a storm no one could see had already begun to form. The afternoon at Chicago, O'Hare felt like a nightmare wrapped in neon light. Passengers shouted, rolling suitcases screeched across the stone floor, and the announcements over the loudspeakers crackled as if they too were exhausted by the chaos flooding the terminal. The burnt smell of over-brewed coffee mixed with the heavy scent of soggy bagels and the faint tang of jet fuel, a cocktail of odors that only a giant airport could inflict on people. In that river of bodies rushing past Dr. Naomi Carter stood completely still, the way a forgotten mile marker remains, standing in the middle of a storm. At 46 years old, she carried a quiet steadiness, dressed in a plain black hoodie, grey joggers worn in sneakers, her hair tied back, no jewelry, no designer bag. To anyone glancing her way, she looked like a college professor or a shift-based technician or a mother heading home after a long conference. No one knew this unremarkable-looking woman was the founder and CEO of Carter Biologics, the company that controlled 70% of emergency medical specimen transport across the entire eastern United States. No one knew that a single order from her could delay life-saving surgeries nationwide. No one knew that every medical cargo flight, carrying hearts, livers, kidneys, donor tissue, or specialized cancer drugs, operated on the schedules she personally approved. They looked at her appearance and assumed they knew who she was. They knew nothing at all. Beside her stood Evan Brooks, 27 tall and lean shirt, buttoned to the collar, clutching a laptop backpack like a lifeline. Evan kept scanning the area, the young assistant jittery, not because of the crowds, but because he was still adjusting to the fact that the calm woman sipping water beside him was someone who could keep an airline CEO awake for an entire month. Flight 451 will begin pre-boarding shortly, the announcement echoed. Naomi nodded her voice, calm but firm as she said, "Let's go, Evan." To Evan, her tone sounded like a commander's order. He had seen Naomi silence 3 senior attorneys from a major insurance corporation with only 2 questions. He had watched her command the attention of an entire boardroom filled with directors from the country's largest hospitals. But that was the Naomi of the conference table, sharp, formal, authoritative. The Naomi beside him now seemed simple, quiet, almost invisible. And that was exactly what led the world to underestimate her, a mistake they would pay for dearly in just a few hours. They walked toward Gate 27B, the priority boarding area for Skylink Airlines. The priority lane was marked off with deep blue velvet ropes, occupied by a short line of business travelers tapping away on their phones. To the right stretched the economy line, a long serpent of restless children, irritated adults, and frayed tempers. Naomi and Evan stepped into the priority lane. The moment Naomi reached the counter, Linda Watkins, 50 years old, her thin layer of makeup, barely hiding the fatigue of back-to-back shifts, shot Naomi a look that categorized her instantly. It was the look of someone trained to judge travelers by their shoes, their bags, their hair. 1 second was all it took. Then Linda released a voice, dripping with sweetness and quiet cruelty, the kind that comes from holding a tiny position of power for far too long. "Honey, the economy line is over there." Evan stiffened. Not because of the words, but because of how Linda said them. The tiny flick of her wrist toward the economy line, the way she purposely avoided looking at the digital boarding pass Naomi was already holding up, the way she dismissed Naomi as someone who clearly did not belong in this lane, the way she radiated unwarranted confidence. As if Naomi Carter was nothing more than a confused traveler. As if Naomi's true power, a concept Linda had never even understood, didn't exist. Evan opened his mouth. "Excuse me, she." But Naomi placed a single hand on his arm, gentle but decisive, like a pebble settling on boiling water. That tiny gesture silenced him instantly. Naomi said nothing. She did not question, argue, or explain. She simply lifted her phone again, holding her digital boarding pass, so the words, "First Class, Skylink, Priority," glowed clearly on the screen. Linda did not bother to look. "Priority is for premium guests, honey." She emphasized the word premium, as if reciting social hierarchy. In that moment, Evan had only one thought. They had made a terrible mistake. But what frightened him more was the stillness on Naomi's face. No frown, no protest, no irritation. Nothing. Just the calm of a perfectly flat lake, and everyone who had ever seen Naomi in a boardroom knew when the lake was that still. Something powerful was churning beneath the surface. Linda flicked her hand again. Back of the line. Last warning. Her voice was swallowed by the general noise of the airport, yet to Evan it hit like a gavel slamming down. Naomi lowered her phone, her eyes locked on Linda's, not angry, but assessing cold enough to make the air feel colder. Evan felt his chest tighten. He was standing beside a woman who could alter the fate of an entire airline, and Linda had no idea who stood in front of her. Naomi dipped her head slightly, unlocked her phone, and her fingers moved with the precision Evan knew well, fast, efficient, unemotional. One message. 5 words. Execute Indigo Skylink, med cargo immediate. Sent. No sound, no flash, nothing dramatic. But for anyone familiar with Carter Biologics, it was a moment capable of shaking the entire medical aviation sector. Naomi turned to Evan. "We're leaving." That was all. No explanation, no emotion. They stepped out of the priority lane, while Linda crossed her arms, a tiny smirk of triumph touching her lips. A small victory, one she would soon pay for with her entire career. Evan followed Naomi toward a newsstand kiosk. Her face still looked calm, untouched, but he knew that inside her mind calculations were already running. The scale of the fallout, the speed of impact, the effect on the young girl waiting for a lung transplant in New York. Evan wanted to ask to say something, anything, but he knew Naomi Carter never acted impulsively. If she had sent Indigo, she had already assessed every outcome. It was not anger. It was a decision. A decision Skylink would soon understand in the most brutal way. A notification chimed in Naomi's pocket. She opened it. It was the internal confirmation from Carter Biologics. Indigo acknowledged full activation sequence initiated. Evan swallowed hard. Not because he feared Naomi, but because he feared what was coming for the people who had dismissed her. A short distance away, Linda continued scanning boarding passes, unaware that with each beep, she was stepping closer to the edge of unemployment. Behind her, Franklin Moore, Skylink's station manager at O'Hare, was in his office checking emails, unaware that in a few minutes his phone would explode with calls and his life would be swept up by an invisible storm. Naomi stood by the glass-wall airport lights, reflecting in her steady eyes. No one in the terminal knew that the woman standing quietly by herself could bring an airline to its knees with a single message? No one. But they would know. And by the time they learned the truth, it would already be too late. The moment Naomi Carter stepped out of the priority lane, no one in the airport knew that deep in the cargo hold of Flight 451 lay something so precious that an entire medical team in New York was holding its breath for it, a pair of donated lungs for 6-year-old Eliza Turner, sealed inside a Carter Biologics preservation container where the slightest shift in temperature or humidity could mean death. Passengers around Naomi only saw a simple woman being redirected to the economy line, unaware that at that exact moment, a small life was hanging by a thread thinner than the pride of any airport employee. Naomi stood beside the newsstand kiosk, a water bottle in hand, her eyes calm as she watched the stream of people flowing past. But inside her mind, the countdown had begun. She knew precisely how long the lungs could survive. She knew each minute slipping away was another stroke cutting through Eliza's chance at life. Evan stood beside her, his face drained of color, the moment he realized she had truly activated indigo. He had never seen indigo used outside of training scenarios, because it was created to never be used at all. The system was like the emergency kill switch in a laboratory, and anyone who touched it meant a mistake had crossed into the territory of the unforgivable. Evan swallowed, trying to steady his voice, even though it trembled. "Do they do? They know what's in that cargo hold." Naomi did not answer immediately. Her face was unreadable still and cold like a winter lake. "No," she said at last, "and that is exactly why they do not deserve to transport it." Evan fell silent. In that instant, he understood why Naomi was the one leading Carter Biologics, and he was not. Her perspective was not that of someone offended by an unprofessional gate agent. To her, this was a breach in the system, a tiny crack in the wall protecting human life, and any crack like that could kill a patient with no one accountable except her. On the other side of the country, inside a towering glass building in San Francisco, Daniel Lee's phone vibrated with the notification pattern only Naomi used. He had been presenting European routing strategies to the board, but the moment he saw the signal, a vein pulsed in his temple. Daniel excused himself without explanation. When the conference room door closed behind him, he checked the message. Only 5 words. "Execute Indigo Skylink Med Cargo." He inhaled sharply and hurried toward his office. No one in that boardroom knew that in a matter of minutes, Skylink's stock price would begin plummeting like a heavy stone falling off a cliff. Daniel opened the emergency control dashboard, entered his authorization code, and hit enter. Instantly, the system unleashed a pre-programmed chain reaction, withdrawing $24 million in transport fees, freezing all Skylink access to the biological specimen database, locking every scheduled shipment for the next 6 months, and delivering automated alerts to the entire Skylink executive board. The market chart lit up, the red spreading fast, like blood seeping into fabric. And Daniel exhaled slowly. He knew Naomi would only trigger Indigo if someone at Skylink had crossed the one line she never allowed anyone to cross, the line of respect for human life. Back in Chicago, inside the small frosted glass office behind Gate 27B, Franklin Moore was sipping lukewarm coffee when the alerts exploded across his computer screen. Franklin had worked in airports for more than 20 years and had seen almost every possible crisis: unruly passengers, violent outbursts, complete system blackouts. But what he was seeing now made cold sweat slide down his spine. A bright red email subject line, immediate termination, Carter Biologics contract. Franklin stammered as he called headquarters, and when the deputy operations director finally answered, his voice sounded like someone caught in the middle of a storm. "Frank, this started at your gate. Someone from Carter Biologics was there. Someone just got insulted. Franklin nearly dropped the phone. Who did that?" "Find out." Franklin sprinted toward the boarding area, and the moment he saw Naomi standing calmly near the window, not yelling, not arguing, simply observing the world like someone waiting for the result of an equation, he knew at once this was the spark. This was the beginning of the storm. But what made his skin prickle was not Naomi's presence. It was her silence. Harmless people always try to explain. Powerful people never need to. Meanwhile, in the cargo hold, the lung preservation container continued its steady vibrations, its temperature control system humming rhythmically. The green indicator light blinked in a slow cycle like the faint heartbeat of Eliza, fading with each passing second. If anyone had been standing next to the unit, they would have heard the soft, steady breath of the cooling system, like a tiny creature fighting to survive. No one knew that what trembled inside that hold was more important than every suitcase on that aircraft combined. No one knew, and that was the problem. Linda Watkins, the woman who had pushed Naomi toward the economy line, continued her work with a tired smile, forced into politeness. "Next boarding pass, please. Have a nice flight. Enjoy your trip." To Linda, it was just another long day, another endless line of travelers. A job of repetition, automatic greetings. And that was what made the situation dangerous. Great disasters often begin with people who believe they are simply doing their job correctly. Linda had no idea that each beep of the scanner was taking her closer to losing everything. No idea that her casual honey had become a slap across the dignity of a woman with more influence than the CEO of the airline she worked for. Naomi checked the time, then gazed out toward the runway. Another aircraft was taxiing its wheels, hissing lightly against the pavement, leaving a faint gleam under the airport lights. She thought of Eliza. Then she thought of Eliza's mother, who had likely not dared lift her eyes from the floor for more than 48 hours. She thought of Dr. Sharma, who once told her, "We are not just racing the clock, we are racing death, but I trust you." Naomi closed her eyes for a brief second. She hated Indigo, hated having to use it, because every time she used it, someone would lose their job. An airline would lose tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of people would face investigation. But she used it because even the smallest error in medical transport could become the blade that pierced Eliza's lungs. Evan looked at Naomi, hesitant. "Are we betting too much on this?" Naomi opened her eyes. "No," she said. "I am correcting a mistake. Their mistake." Evan nodded, though his chest still felt heavy. A notification tone chimed from his phone. He glanced at the screen and nearly dropped it. Skylink stock down 2.4% live. Cargo lockout active. Field retrieval unit estimated arrival in 9 minutes. Evan turned to Naomi, his face drained of blood. "The rapid response team, they're coming. Of course." Naomi replied softly, like a breath. "When others fail to do their job, we do it for them." And beyond the glass, the runway glowed under golden lights, while Naomi Carter stood there, calm, silent, yet radiating power like an approaching storm. No one knew that in a few minutes, Flight 451 would be grounded entirely. No one knew that the woman who had been dismissed from the priority lane was the same woman who could freeze an entire airline's operations with a single message. No one knew that the storm coming did not roar. It arrived in the silence of a woman they underestimated. And by the time they realized it, everything was already too late. The storm never begins with an explosion. It begins with a small vibration, a faint disturbance in the air. And at Gate 27B, that vibration was the confused blink of Linda Watkins as her boarding pass scanner suddenly flickered and turned a blazing red. Huh! Linda frowned and scanned again. The machine emitted a piercing beep and locked up entirely. A large message flooded the screen. Boarding suspended authority revoked. Passengers nearby stirred with irritation. A man in an expensive suit scowled and raised his voice. "What is this? I have a connecting flight scan." "It again." Linda pressed the reset button. Nothing. She tapped the keyboard. The screen went black. A bead of sweat slid down her temple, not from heat, but from the creeping sense that something was very, very wrong. Then her radio crackled to life, Franklin Moore's voice, tight and strangled, as if an invisible hand were closing around his throat. "Linda, stop boarding. Stop everything. I am coming." Linda opened her mouth to respond, but Franklin had already appeared in the distance, running, practically throwing himself toward the counter, his face white as paper. In 18 years at the airport, Linda had never seen Franklin run. That alone sent a cold shiver through her spine. "Frank, the scanner is broken. I am trying to—" "It is not the scanner." He cut her off, his voice, barely more than a whisper terrified passengers might overhear. "Something extremely serious is happening. This flight is frozen. Temporarily, Flight 451 is completely suspended." Suspended, Linda blinked. "What do you mean? Weather mechanical? The plane is still right there. Not weather. Not mechanical?" Franklin looked directly into her eyes, and in them was the horror of a man staring over the edge of a cliff. "It is Carter Biologics." Linda blinked again. A hollow gap opened between her eyebrows. She knew that name vaguely from cargo manifests, but she was only the boarding pass checker. She did not handle cargo. "Carter, what? Do not tell me you do not remember," Franklin hissed. "This flight is carrying emergency medical cargo for Carter Biologics. Did you see anyone from Carter? Anyone with a badge? Anyone acting unusual?" Linda scanned the crowd. Business travelers, exhausted tourists, mothers juggling children. And then stubbornly, foolishly, she said, "No, just normal passengers." I did not see anyone important. But the moment the words left her mouth, memory stabbed through her like lightning. The woman in the black hoodie and joggers, calm and quiet, standing in the priority line. A face Linda had not bothered to look at for even half a second, a boarding pass. She had not even scanned a woman she had shoved toward the economy line with a single honey. Linda swallowed her throat dry as paper. There was one woman, she murmured, barely audible even to herself. She was wearing athletic clothes. I thought she was in the wrong line. She did not look like a priority passenger. Franklin's eyes went completely dark. His expression hardened, stripped of every trace of humanity. "You kicked someone out of priority." Linda nodded weakly. She did not look. "Not look," Franklin repeated. "Not look." Each word dropped like a stone. "You kicked the CEO of Carter Biologics out of the priority line." Linda felt as if someone had slapped her across the face. The air around her thickened. "What CEO? No, she cannot be." She was wearing joggers. Franklin only stared at her. And in that silence, Linda understood her career had just ended. Franklin turned his eyes, scanning the gate area, searching for the woman he had never noticed, until he saw Naomi standing a short distance away, calm as if she were merely observing the line at Starbucks, completely detached from the chaos she herself had set in motion. No one in the terminal recognized Naomi Carter. She was not a celebrity, not a public figure. No one knew her face. But to Franklin, she looked like a spear aimed straight at the heart of Skylink Airlines. "She is right there," he whispered, as if afraid she might hear him. Linda turned to look, and when she saw Naomi, her heart plummeted. The woman stood too calmly, as if waiting for someone to say, "Everything is ready." Evan stood beside Naomi, not knowing where to put his hands. He kept checking his phone, each new alert hitting like a punch to the gut. Skylink stock down 5.8%. Cargo lockout 100%. Field team estimated arrival 4 minutes. Evan swallowed a wave of nausea as he watched millions of dollars evaporate faster than a taxi speeding down the Kennedy Expressway. He turned to Naomi, but she still wore that same expression, peaceful, unmovable as if watching rainfall. Not happy, not sad, not angry, just observing, as if she had known all along this would happen. Linda took a shaky step forward. She had no intention of approaching Naomi, but her feet moved anyway, pulled by something far stronger than logic, fear. "Frank," she whispered, I should apologize to her, right?" "No," Franklin said sharply. "This is far beyond apologies." At the window, Naomi slowly turned her head. Her eyes were not harsh, not sharp, not punishing. They simply saw everything. Linda felt a cold needle pierce straight through her body. Naomi said nothing. She did not nod. She did not shake her head. But that look alone told Linda she had no place here anymore. Naomi gently unlocked her phone and swiped a notification. Evan saw it first. "Retrieval unit has entered restricted airfield zone. Stand by." Evan exhaled shakily. "They are here." A long siren wailed from the direction of the runway. Linda jumped. Franklin spun around instantly, his heart nearly stopping, as he saw 2 black vans with the Carter Biologics logo, a heartbeat line, like an ECG wave racing through the security gate, escorted by 2 airport operations vehicles. The ground vibrated as the wheels thundered across the concrete. Lights flashed. Ground crew stepped aside. Passengers pulled out their phones to record the scene, unaware they were capturing the beginning of one of the worst crises in Skylink's history. Evan's eyes widened. "They respond faster than the police." Naomi replied softly but firmly, because life does not wait for anyone. When the vans reached the cargo hold of Flight 451, Naomi did not need to look to know what would happen next. 6 Carter Biologics technicians stepped out with synchronized movements like a special operations unit. They didn't shout. They didn't posture. They simply worked fast, precise, almost frighteningly efficient. One technician presented a digital authorization board to the Skylink ground chief. He read it, then turned pale. "Carter is recalling the cargo." "No," the technician said. "We are saving the cargo." The cargo door opened. A rush of cold air spilled out. The biological container was lifted out in complete silence, almost ceremonial. They held it with both hands, as if carrying a living being, and to them that was exactly what it was. Franklin froze in place. Linda's arms hung limp at her sides. Evan watched the technicians carry the box as if hypnotized. And Naomi, she merely observed, silent, cold, unshaken. When the container was secured inside the specialized van and the door shut, Naomi turned to Evan, her voice quiet but weighted with the authority of someone accustomed to orchestrating situations other people call disasters. "Let's go." Evan nodded, not daring to question her. Naomi Carter walked through the crowd like a shadow no one recognized. But her power was far from invisible. It had just paralyzed an entire airline. And this was only the beginning of the earthquake that bore her name. As she walked away, Linda collapsed into a chair. Franklin stood frozen like a stone pillar, and the air around Gate 27B grew so heavy that everyone felt it, even if they did not know why. Something irreversible had just occurred. Naomi left the terminal, but the aftershocks of her footsteps were only beginning. And on the other side of the country, under the cold glow of the operating room, lights, little Eliza Turner was still waiting for the first breath of her new life, a breath only Naomi could bring to her. And she would bring it even if she had to drag an entire airline down to do it. Franklin Moore had never felt his legs this heavy as he walked toward Naomi Carter. Each step felt dragged down by the invisible weight of responsibility fear and the swelling dread in his chest. He had faced drunk passengers, midnight snowstorm cancellations, even federal investigations. But never not once had he approached someone knowing that a single sentence from her could turn his entire career into smoke drifting through the air. Naomi stood by the glass window, the runway lights casting a faint glow across her face, making her appear as though she did not belong to this chaotic world at all, but belonged instead to another realm, the realm of people whose decisions carried human lives on their fingertips. Evan stood beside her with both hands gripping his backpack, straps his face pulled tight like a stretched wire. He saw Franklin approaching, and his first instinct was to step in front of Naomi as if he could shield her from danger. But Naomi lightly touched his arm, a small gesture, yet enough to make him step aside. Franklin stopped a few yards away, breath uneven. He did not dare come closer, did not dare meet Naomi's eyes immediately. When he finally gathered the last scraps of courage he had left, he spoke. "Dr. Carter." Naomi turned. Her eyes were deep and cold, like a still lake, yet beneath that stillness was a force capable of swallowing an entire storm. "Yes," she answered, her voice soft but unmistakably clear. Franklin inhaled deeply, so deeply his chest felt ready to burst. "I am Franklin Moore, station manager for Skylink here at O'Hare." He practically pushed each word out of his dry throat. "I came to apologize for what happened at the gate." Naomi looked at him. No expression, no nod, no polite smile, just a look. And that look made Franklin want to step back. "An incident," Naomi said quietly. "You think this is an incident?" Franklin felt his spine freeze. He knew he had used the wrong word. Very wrong. I mean a mistake. A serious mistake. "My employee. She..." He glanced at Linda, who was standing only a few steps away, with a face pale as chalk, looking like someone awaiting a death sentence. She behaved inappropriately. "I assure you, her actions do not reflect," Naomi cut in her voice, calm but sharp as a thin blade. "Do not reflect what Franklin stammered. Do not reflect our company culture." Naomi tilted her head slightly, as if examining a strange object. "And what exactly is your company culture?" Franklin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Naomi continued her voice, slow, each sentence pressing him deeper into a corner. "Is it judging passengers by their shoes, by the color of their clothes, their hair, or their skin?" Linda heard that and collapsed into a chair. She covered her mouth with her hands. but tears still forced their way through her fingers. Franklin swallowed hard, feeling his throat scrape like sandpaper. "Dr. Carter, please. We are truly sorry. We will get you on the flight immediately. We will fire the employee responsible. We will compensate you. A lifetime first-class pass. A financial settlement. We will do anything to fix it." Naomi interrupted again. "You think this can be fixed with a first-class ticket?" Franklin did not answer. He could not. Naomi took a step toward him. Not threatening, not towering, but the air around Franklin suddenly felt heavier, like the entire room had collapsed onto his shoulders. "Mr. Moore," she said, "do you know what is inside the cargo hold of this flight?" Franklin nodded awkwardly. "Yes, I was just briefed. An emergency transport, a donated lung." Naomi stared directly into his eyes. A set of lungs with 4 hours left in the safe window. A surgery prepared since midnight. A surgeon waiting in New York. A child waiting to breathe. And you entrusted her life to someone who did not respect a passenger enough to look at a boarding pass. Franklin felt as if he had been shoved into a pit of ice. Naomi did not stop. Carter Biologics is not transporting cargo. We are transporting the future of human beings. Every minute lost can kill a patient. One misplaced frown from your employee can become a death sentence. Franklin gasped for breath. He looked at Naomi the way a defendant looks at a judge reading the verdict. Naomi continued, her voice low but unwavering. "And that is why I terminated the contract." Franklin blurted out, "No, please, Dr. Carter. You misunderstand. This was an individual mistake." Not Naomi's gaze pinned him in place. If your system allows an individual mistake to endanger a patient, then it is the system that is flawed. Franklin could not move. It felt like some invisible gravity held him where he stood. Naomi lowered her voice even further, just enough for him to hear. "The contract has been terminated at the highest level. It cannot be reversed. It cannot be negotiated." Franklin felt his chest collapse inward. "Dr. Carter, when you say that, you mean Naomi did not let him finish. Skylink will never transport a single biological specimen for Carter Biologics again." A small sound came from behind them. Linda Watkins had begun to cry. Franklin turned instinctively, and the sight only made the pain sharper. The employee he had known for 18 years sat hunched over hands, covering her face, broken by the realization that she had destroyed her own life with one word worth less than $1. Naomi glanced at Evan. "Let's go." Evan followed her. Franklin did not move. He reached out a hand as if grasping the last thread of hope. "Dr. Carter, please, your shipment, the lungs. If they do not fly on this aircraft," then Naomi turned back, and for the first time in his life, Franklin Moore felt truly small. "Skylink no longer deserves to carry them," Naomi said. "I will do it myself." Franklin stuttered. "You're yourself?" "You mean..." Naomi held his gaze, her eyes lit not by anger, but by the steel will of someone who carries human life in her hands. "My aircraft is on its way." Evan's phone rang at that moment. He answered quickly. "Dr. Carter, the rapid response team has completed the retrieval. The vehicle has left the tarmac. We need to head to the private arrival zone immediately." Naomi nodded. She walked. Each step felt like another nail sealing the coffin of Skylink's future. Franklin could only watch. He did not dare follow, did not dare speak, did not dare breathe too loudly, because he knew no apology could patch the hole Linda had created. No training program could fix a culture already rotten. No compensation could buy back the trust of someone like Naomi Carter. And as the terminal's automatic doors opened, and Naomi stepped through them. The light outside fell across her shoulders, dragging behind her the silent collapse of an airline. A woman in a hoodie, a single honey, a 5-word message, and now an entire corporation kneeling before her decision. Naomi did not look back. She did not need to. The aftershocks of the storm she unleashed would speak for her. And on the other side of the country, in the quiet kitchen of a small apartment in Brooklyn, the mother of Eliza Turner still sat clutching her phone, unable to move from her chair, waiting for a call that might save her daughter's life. Naomi knew that. And she knew one more thing: she would make it in time, at any cost. As Naomi Carter and Evan stepped out through the glass doors of the terminal, the cold early month wind swept across the outdoor corridor, carrying the smell of jet fuel and the lingering warmth of late afternoon sun off the runway. No one in the pickup area knew that the woman in a hoodie walking past them had just torn apart a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars with a single sentence. Naomi did not look left or right. She walked straight ahead, each stride steady, as if she already knew the world would rearrange itself according to her will. Evan struggled to keep his breathing even. The crisis at Gate 27B still clung to his shoulders like a slab of stone. He still could not believe everything that had unfolded in less than half an hour. Indigo-activated Skylink system, frozen Carter Biologics rapid response team, appearing on the runway like a special operations unit, and now Naomi leaving a collapsing airline behind her without a backward glance. Evan tried to speak, but Naomi stopped walking first, not because of him, not because of the wind, but because her phone vibrated. A call. On the screen, Thomas Harrington, CEO of Skylink Airlines. Evan froze. Naomi looked at the phone for exactly 3 seconds. She always gave a partner one chance to speak, one chance only. She accepted the call. Dr. Carter. Thomas Harrington's voice sounded strained, as if he had sprinted down 5 hallways. Behind him, Evan could hear chaos, keyboards clacking, someone shouting, "We just lost another 2%. I just received the report. I can barely believe this is happening." "You will believe it," Naomi replied calmly, "because it is happening." Silence followed. A silence that felt to Evan like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. Then Thomas spoke again, voice trembling but trying to stay composed. "On behalf of Skylink, I want to offer my deepest apologies. We take full responsibility. That employee, she has been suspended immediately." Naomi said nothing. Thomas inhaled shakily. "This is a serious but isolated error. It does not reflect our culture." Naomi cut him off, her voice, even and sharp as a thin blade. "I am not interested in the culture you describe. I am interested in the culture your employees display." Thomas went silent. Naomi continued, "And I only trust what I see." On the other end, someone yelled, "Stock down 8%. Valuation wants an emergency call." Thomas lowered his voice, as if trying to stop a building from collapsing. "Dr. Carter, please. A 20-year partnership. A strategic relationship. It cannot end because of a word." Naomi asked, her voice cold as frost on steel. "No, Mr. Harrington. It ends because of the mindset behind that word." Thomas held his breath. Naomi went on slowly, each word sinking deeper into him. "If your employee can judge a passenger based on clothing, she can misjudge a shipment. And if she misjudges my shipment, someone will die." Thomas spoke quickly, desperation bleeding through every syllable. "We can fix this. We will fix it. I am asking, no, I am begging you, give us a chance to correct this." Naomi looked toward the distant runway lights, blinking red and green in the dusk. "I do not want a promise. I want trust, and you cannot buy it back." Thomas swallowed hard, reaching for any lifeline left. "Then what can we do? Anything you need, any amount of compensation." "I will retrain every employee," Naomi replied. "You cannot repair culture in one night." Thomas's voice cracked like something inside him had begun to break. "Dr. Carter, at least allow Skylink to complete the current transport. Let us take the lungs to New York. All we ask is a chance to make this right." Naomi closed her eyes for a single second. 1 second was enough to clear all the noise. Enough for Evan to realize she had just made her final decision. "No," she said. "Skylink has lost the right to touch that life." Thomas choked out. "Dear God, you are putting the entire surgery at risk." Naomi opened her eyes, her voice forged in steel. "No, Mr. Harrington. Your failure put it at risk. I am correcting your failure." Silence. Absolute silence. Evan thought the call had ended, but Naomi was not finished. "My aircraft will arrive in 40 minutes. The retrieval team has collected the cargo. The surgery will proceed as planned." Thomas whispered, "Your aircraft, I do not entrust a patient's survival to an airline that does not respect its passengers." Evan stared at Naomi as if watching a storm split the ocean in half. Thomas tried one more time, voice unraveling. "Dr. Carter, please. Just one chance, one meeting, one review. Something." Naomi looked toward the pickup lane. A black SUV from Carter Biologics had just turned into the entrance, its headlights casting a long beam across the pavement. "The chance was given," she said softly. "But your employee told me to stand in the economy line." Thomas could no longer speak. There were no words left that could save him. And Naomi ended the call with a single sentence that made even Evan shiver and made the COO of Skylink fall silent. "No one is allowed to disrespect my patients. No one." Naomi hung up. The final tone sounded like the closing of a coffin lid. Evan stood, motionless, heart pounding. "Dr. Carter," he whispered. "You know Skylink will collapse because of this," Naomi answered without looking at him. "Not because of me, because of themselves." The SUV pulled up in front of them. The driver stepped out and opened the door. "Dr. Carter, the medical jet is being prepped. They are heating the pressure cabin and finishing final checks on the biological systems. We should depart." Naomi got into the car. Evan followed, still shaken by everything he had witnessed. As the SUV rolled away from the airport, Naomi looked out the window at the terminal, where minutes earlier, a single honey had brought an entire airline to its knees. But she was not angry, not vengeful, not triumphant. She thought of only one thing: Eliza Turner must be able to breathe. Under the fading sunset, the black SUV sped through Chicago like an arrow. Behind them, Gate 27B remained in chaos. But ahead, a medical jet was powering up. And Naomi Carter, the woman in a hoodie who had been dismissed and underestimated, was preparing to become the storm that swept through everything. Because she did not just run a company, she ran the chances people had to stay alive. And no one had the right to underestimate that. Not one single person. The black SUV from Carter Biologics sped down the road leading to O'Hare's private aviation sector, leaving behind the chaotic mess where Skylink was desperately trying to pick up the shattered pieces of its own downfall. City lights reflected across the car windows, streaking into long silver smears against the sky, like brushed metallic paint on the edge of a newborn night. Evan sat in the back seat, gripping his backpack so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. He was not used to this pace, the pace of decisions that could shape or destroy an entire industry. He was not used to Naomi's silence either. She was not angry, not trembling. Not proud, not vindictive, just silent. Silent enough that Evan could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Naomi rested her phone on her lap, her eyes fixed on the window, as though she were calculating the trajectory of the entire world. She did not see the airport. She did not see Gate 27B. She did not see Skylink sinking behind her. She saw only one image, little Eliza Turner lying beneath the cold lights of the ICU, her ruined lungs unable to expand more than a few millimeters. Evan felt he had to say something, even if he was not sure his voice would hold steady. "Dr. Carter," he whispered, as though afraid to break her concentration. "Are you sure we still have time?" Naomi turned her head, not to scold him, not to chastise him, but simply to look him directly in the eyes, as if speaking in a language only people who truly understood human life could hear. "Evan," she said slowly, "we always have time until the moment we decide to give up." Evan took a deep breath. That statement was not meant to comfort. It was the truth, and the truth was sharp, but never cruel, just precise. As the SUV turned into the private aviation section, a steel gate slid open, revealing a wide, quiet expanse, completely detached from the chaos of the commercial terminal. Floodlights reflected off the polished white fuselage of the waiting Gulfstream G550, a sleek, silent predator of the night sky. Along its side was the Carter Biologics emblem, a heartbeat line curving into a medical pulse. Evan's throat tightened. He had seen this G550 in photos, but seeing it in person, engines humming, doors open, waiting for Naomi to board, felt like witnessing power sculpted into metal and jet engines. The SUV door opened. A gust of night wind struck Evan's face, cold enough to snap him back into the moment. A ground operations officer rushed forward and opened the rear door for Naomi. "Dr. Carter," he said, with the discipline of a soldier, "the crew is ready. The bio-pressurized chamber is undergoing final stabilization. The lung container was loaded onto the aircraft 4 minutes ago. We can depart the moment you authorize it." Naomi nodded once. No hesitation. No need for confirmation. No second guessing. She stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the aircraft stairs with a calm but resolute pace, like someone who had done this hundreds of times. Evan followed awestruck, almost feeling small beside her. When Naomi placed her foot on the first step, her phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel Lee. Estimated surgical prep time 2 hours 14 minutes. Buffer left 58 minutes. Naomi read it, then slipped her phone into her pocket. She did not speed up. She did not change her breathing. Naomi Carter was not controlled by time. She controlled time. Inside the cabin, warm, golden lighting washed over the spacious interior, designed not for luxury, but for efficiency. Folding work tables, rotating chairs, integrated computers, real-time data screens, and at the back, behind a sealed door, the biological control chamber, where technician Marcus monitored every metric of the lung container as if he were holding his own heart in his hands. "Temperature steady," Marcus reported as Naomi entered. "Pressure stable, oxygen flow constant, no anomalies." Naomi nodded. "Good. Prepare for level 2 turbulence. Has the pilot been briefed?" "Yes, ma'am. He will avoid storm zones and take the lower altitude route to reduce pressure fluctuation on the container." "Perfect." Naomi returned to the main cabin. Evan took the seat across from her, trying to hide the tremor beneath his excitement. He had seen advanced laboratories, heard critical conference calls, watched Naomi negotiate with the largest hospitals in the country. But he had never felt himself step into a real race against death until now. A flight attendant approached. "Dr. Carter, we are preparing for takeoff. Would you like anything? Water, coffee?" Naomi answered. Water, her voice forged in frost. As the jet began taxiing down its private runway, Evan looked out the window and saw the stark contrast between two worlds. On one side, the chaos of a collapsing commercial airline undone by a single but fatal mistake, and on the other, the terrifying stillness of Carter Biologics, silent, cold, precise, efficient like a gleaming surgical scalpel. No one noticed until it was too late. Naomi did not look outside. She opened her tablet, reviewed weather maps, checked 3 alternate flight paths, analyzed potential wind shear levels, and confirmed reports from the chief pilot. Evan felt she was not just controlling this flight, she was controlling a child's fate. The engines roared, cabin lights dimmed. 1 second later, the force of acceleration pressed Evan into his seat. The G550 shot into the night sky like a silver arrow. Through the window, Evan watched Chicago shrink beneath them, neighborhoods, towers, highways, slipping away like severed ropes. Everything fell behind them, just as Skylink was falling out of orbit. Once the plane leveled out, Evan turned to Naomi. She remained focused on the map, not with nervousness, but with the absolute concentration of someone managing the most important mission of the night. Dr. Carter, Evan whispered. "If we are even a little late," Naomi interrupted him, her voice calm. "We will not be late." "But if, Evan..." Naomi looked directly at him. Her eyes were 2 still centers of gravity amid the storm. Being late is not an option. Not in this work. Not when a child is waiting for her breath. Evan bowed his head, and in that moment, he understood. Naomi was not fighting Skylink, not fighting disrespect, not fighting prejudice. Those were merely obstacles. The enemy Naomi Carter fought against was death, and death had no brakes, no sympathy, no room for error. Naomi returned to her tablet, her eyes steady but bright with steel. "We will arrive in time," she said. "Not because I believe in luck, but because I prepared for Skylink's failure years ago." Evan's breath caught. "You mean..." Naomi answered with a sentence that sent a chill down his spine. Indigo was not created to respond to emergencies. It was created to predict human behavior. Outside the window, the aircraft sliced through the night sky like a cold blade cutting across a sheet of black silk. Naomi leaned back slightly. For the first time in hours, she closed her eyes. Not to rest, but to picture the small face of Eliza Turner, and to promise herself that the child's next breath would not be determined by the attitude of a gate agent. It would be determined by the precision of a woman who had been underestimated because she was standing in the wrong line. And Naomi Carter would never allow the world to define her worth by the shoes she wore. The battle had begun, and the night sky had opened its path for a race against death, a race Naomi had already decided she would win, at any cost. The G550 sliced through a thick layer of clouds as if tearing through a black curtain, and only minutes after reaching cruising altitude, a violent jolt slammed Evan back into his seat. The water cup on the table popped open, droplets scattering into the air before pattering onto the floor like rain. Evan gasped. What just... But Naomi had already braced her hand on the armrest beforehand, her expression unchanged, as if the turbulence were nothing more than the morning shake of a crowded city bus. The overhead speakers crackled to life with the calm voice of the captain. Level 2 turbulence, not dangerous. We will be descending 300 feet to avoid a shear layer. Evan inhaled deeply, trying to calm the pounding in his chest. But Naomi sat upright, her eyes fixed sharply on the screen in front of her. Estimated time to arrival, 1 hour, 47 minutes. This kind of turbulence won't affect Evan did not even finish before Naomi answered, her voice low but clear. No. The biocontainer was built for far worse conditions. The only dangerous thing in the sky is delay. Evan nodded, trying to push down the anxiety rising in him. But when he looked at Naomi, he realized her eyes did not show worry at all. What they held was something far more suffocating, total focus, the kind of focus that made the air around her feel tight, as if she were holding the world's countdown clock inside her skull. Naomi opened her tablet, checking the lung container's stats again. 36.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen stable. Pressure stable. Marcus. She called her voice sharp as metal striking stone turbulence report. The door to the biochamber opened slightly, and Marcus stepped out, expression tense. The container is still within tolerance. I reinforced 2 additional anchor points as a precaution, but if this turbulence continues too long, it will not Naomi cut him off. I chose this flight path. I know which corridor is clean enough. Evan shivered slightly. There were moments he felt Naomi was not just running a company, she was running the weather itself. But before Marcus could return to his station, Naomi's phone vibrated. A tone Evan had never heard before. Short, sharp, reserved for one person, Dr. Anita Sharma, the lead transplant surgeon at Mount Sinai. Naomi answered immediately. Dr. Carter Sharma's voice came through tight as a stretched string. Behind her, Evan heard rapid footsteps, metal instruments clattering, and the quick beeping of a heart monitor. We completed the prep meds. The patient is in pre-op. The surgical team is scrubbed in. Time remaining on the lungs, Naomi, we have 62 minutes. Evan saw Naomi close her eyes for a single second, as if visualizing the exact distance between them and New York, then open them with pure steel. We left Chicago. No further delays. I need an exact time. Naomi Sharma pressed her voice, firm but trembling. I cannot put the girl on the table without knowing the lungs are guaranteed. Naomi glanced at the ETA on the screen. 1 hour 31 minutes to New York. But that was only arrival. Not ground transport. Not traffic. Not unforeseen obstacles. She calculated for 3 seconds, then spoke a sentence that made both Evan and Marcus snap their heads toward her. We will be there in 54 minutes. The line went silent. A silence heavier than the sound of wind slamming against the aircraft's hull. Then Sharma whispered, Naomi. If you are wrong, I am not wrong, Naomi cut in. Prep the operating room. When I say we arrive, it means the lungs are already in the hospital elevator. Evan's mouth fell open. Naomi had just cut 40 minutes off the ETA, a number that was impossible. Impossible. But Sharma did not argue. Very well, she said. Anesthesia will hold the patient within safe limits a bit longer, but Naomi, the girl, is fading fast. Please bring us her future. Naomi did not answer the last sentence. She simply ended the call, staring forward, as if her will alone could rip the sky open. Evan swallowed hard. Dr. Carter, 54 minutes, that is impossible. Naomi turned her head, her eyes filled with both the night sky and fire beneath it. In our work, impossible means nothing. He had no response. Naomi leaned back slightly in her seat, though there was nothing relaxed about the movement. She looked like a warrior, bracing her back against a shield before charging into the final enemy. The jet shuddered again. This time, Naomi lifted her face slightly, her brows tightening. Evan gripped the armrest with both hands. The aircraft dipped, right-steadied, then leveled. The captain's voice returned more strained than before. "We are avoiding an unexpected, strong wind front, but I will try to shorten our path." Naomi hit the intercom button, her voice sharp and commanding. "Captain, I need that flight time cut as much as possible. I want to land in New York in under 1 hour. I will push the limits, ma'am." "But cutting 40 minutes? It is not a request," Naomi said. "It is a medical directive." Evan looked toward the cockpit through the crack in the door. The captain's expression said everything he understood. The woman in the VIP cabin was not a passenger. She was an order. 1 minute later, the engines roared louder. The G550 tilted slightly, accelerating harder, tearing into thicker clouds as if punching through them with its nose. Naomi stared out the window, her expression no longer calm, but locked into absolute concentration. She was holding someone else's life in her hands, and she knew it. Evan felt his stomach knot as he watched the countdown. 60 minutes. 59. 58. Turbulence shook the cabin. Naomi did not move. In the back, Marcus monitored the container eyes, glued to shifting numbers, ready for the worst. Evan felt his heartbeat, sinking with the engines, with the vibration of the cabin, everything becoming one suffocating orchestra. He glanced at Naomi. She gazed into the night sky, her eyes so deep, he could not tell what she was thinking, fear, worry, or battle. Then he realized it was not fear, not worry. It was pure resolve. Because Naomi Carter did not need the world to treat her kindly. She only needed the world not to stand in her way when she was trying to save a child. The sky jolted again, harder. Evan gripped his seat. Naomi remained still as stone, and the G550 drove faster, deeper into the night, a predator chasing the fragile thread of a little girl's next breath. Beneath the simple fabric of her hoodie, Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. A silent vow to Eliza Turner, waiting in New York, "You will breathe. I promise." On the other side of the night sky, while the Carter Biologics G550 was tearing through clouds toward New York at an unprecedented speed inside Skylink Airlines headquarters in Dallas, another kind of storm was erupting, one without wind or rain, but far more violent than anything nature could produce. The Skylink stock chart on the central screen was in free fall, dropping like a stone hurled off a cliff. The familiar green numbers had vanished, replaced by a field of red, glowing like an open wound. An analyst shouted, "Down 10% already. My God, 10% in half an hour." Another panicked voice followed. "All Carter. Biologics transport systems are locked out. The cargo network is showing global errors." Inside the emergency conference room, CEO Thomas Harrington stood frozen, as though his soul had evaporated. His collar strained against his neck, his face drained under the cold white lights. He tried to remain composed, but his hands trembled, betraying him completely. Is there any way to reverse Indigo?" he asked, sounding like a drowning man clinging to the last splinter of wood. The chief technology officer looked at him, as if he had asked whether the Earth could be spun backward. "There is no reversal. Indigo is a one-way protocol. Once Carter activates it, it cannot be undone." But we apologized. I apologized. Dr. Carter is no longer responding, an employee whispered, as if confessing a crime. Her phone has switched to non-receiving mode. Thomas shut his eyes, jaw clenched. In that moment, he understood he had lost something that could never be purchased again: trust. And that trust had been shattered by a single honey. But the worst had not happened yet. So someone from the market desk, stuttered voice thin with dread. Rumor is Carter Biologics is moving all medical transport to a new partner. A deadly silence filled the room. If that rumor was true, Skylink had not only lost a multi-million-dollar contract, they had lost their foothold in the industry, their market confidence, their core revenue artery. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. All of this because one employee of mine, but an older director with silver hair, cut him off, voice sharp as a blade. Not because of one employee, because our system allowed that employee to exist. The room went completely still. No one could add another word. The red line on the screen bled downward like a wound refusing to close. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Naomi Carter sat inside the G550's cabin. Evan watched her like she was orchestrating the fate of two worlds at once, a child waiting for lungs, and an airline sinking under its own arrogance. The cabin lights cast a warm glow across Naomi's face, making her look both soft and razor-sharp, sculpted from composure and iron will. A message came through from the cockpit. "Dr. Carter, we will begin descent in 8 minutes. New York has opened priority airspace for us." Naomi nodded slightly, her eyes never leaving the ETA, ticking downward like grains of sand slipping through an hourglass. 55 minutes, 54 minutes, 53. Evan stared at her, then at the numbers, then back at her. How could Skylink let this happen? He asked, his voice cracking. Naomi turned her eyes deep as mountain stone with fire burning behind it. "Not this," she said. "This is only the result of what Naomi inhaled as if gathering years of watching the world fail to learn. Complacency." Evan blinked. She continued, voice low and deliberate. "When a company believes customers need them more than they need customers, their culture begins to rot. When they start ranking passengers by clothing, by skin color, by accent, they have already lost before the plane even takes off." Evan absorbed every word, each carving itself into his mind, like etched stone. Naomi did not look back at the ETA screen. She did not need to. She could feel every second burning inside her like a clock beneath her skin. But Evan could not hold back his fear. "Dr. Carter, if we arrive even a little late, Evan." Naomi spoke quietly but firmly. "We are not arriving late." Evan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because when Naomi said that, she did not sound like someone hoping. She sounded like someone commanding the universe. At that moment, a new notification lit up Naomi's tablet. From Daniel Lee. "Skylink stock down 11%. Media calling non-stop. They are panicking." Evan felt the air leave his lungs. 11%. In 1 hour, Naomi remained utterly calm. Fear spreads faster than truth. Evan swallowed. "And you are not afraid," Naomi stared into the darkness outside the window, a sky so black it looked carved out of ink. "I am afraid of only one thing." Evan held his breath. Naomi's voice softened low and heavy, like waves at midnight. "Failure to protect the ones who need protection the most." A chill ran down Evan's spine. Failure not in business, not in negotiation, but failure to save a life. If that was Naomi Carter's only fear, then Evan understood why she was terrifying to corporations and vital to humanity. The aircraft dipped lower, trembling slightly as it cut through thin air. Cabin lights flickered. Evan checked the countdown. They were close to New York, close to the operating team, waiting in silence, close to the little girl whose chance at survival was barely held within her weakened chest. But something in the cabin air shifted, heavier, tighter. Because both Evan and Marcus knew the final stretch was the most merciless. 1 minute late could mean a life lost. Naomi felt that shift too. She spoke softly, but her voice carried the force of a river and the inevitability of a waterfall. Prepare. From this moment on, no one is allowed a single mistake. Evan exhaled shakily. In the distance, the first lights of New York appeared golden dots scattered across the horizon like a fallen strip of the Milky Way. Anita Sharma was waiting somewhere beneath those lights, and Eliza Turner waiting for a miracle carried by a woman once told to stand in the economy line. Naomi slowly closed her eyes, letting herself have one final second of stillness before the true storm began upon landing. She whispered just loud enough for Evan to hear. 48 minutes left. We will save her. And the G550 shot across the eastern sky, carrying that promise like a silver arrow slicing through the darkness toward the last remaining hope waiting on the ground. As the golden lights of New York began to wash over the aircraft like streaks of falling stars, the captain's voice crackled through the intercom, tight enough that it sounded as though he himself was holding his breath. Prepare for descent. Priority air corridor is open. Estimated landing in 12 minutes. Naomi did not lift her gaze from the ETA screen, but her eyes narrowed. Evan felt the shift in her expression, not worry, but a sharpness so focused it seemed she was bending time through sheer force of will. The cabin jolted again, harder this time, yanking Evan halfway out of his seat before the belt caught him. The interior lights flickered, reflecting off the polished metal of the biocontrol unit. Naomi did not look at Evan. She simply said, "This is the hardest part." Evan swallowed. Landing, no. Naomi replied, her voice soft but powerful, like a drawn blade. Getting the lungs to the hospital. As the aircraft pierced the last layer of turbulent air, Naomi tilted her head, listening to the engine's low rumble, then glanced out the window. The city below stretched out like a web of lights, beautiful, cold, and indifferent. In that endless maze of buildings, there was only one place she cared about: Mount Sinai Hospital, where a little girl was waiting with only minutes left. The captain announced, "Now, on final approach. Hold positions." Naomi turned to Evan. "Be ready," she said. Evan nodded, though his hand still shook. The landing gear hit the runway with just enough force to rattle the cabin, but the captain steadied the aircraft as gently as placing a glass on a table. Evan exhaled in relief, but Naomi did not. She never breathed in relief when the mission was not complete. "We have landed," the captain said. "Waiting for escort vehicles?" "No," Naomi said quietly. "The escort vehicles are waiting for us." And at that moment, Evan heard sirens. Not chaotic city sirens, but sharp, commanding tones clearing the way for life itself. 2 NYPD cruisers sped toward the aircraft lights, spinning in red and blue spirals. Behind them was a black SUV bearing the Carter Biologics emblem. The aircraft door swung open. A blast of cold night air rushed in, sharp and alive. Marcus emerged from the rear cabin, cradling the biological container in both hands, as if holding a still, warm heart. "Temperature stable," he said, tension trembling in his voice. "We need to go. Now." Naomi nodded. She descended the stairs first, Evan right behind her, his breath tight with adrenaline. The runway scene looked like a film, flashing lights, ground crew, signaling with precision, police clearing paths, Carter personnel lined up and ready. No shouting, no chaos. Everything moved like a finely tuned machine with Naomi as its central gear. Marcus handed the container to a ground transport specialist. He nodded once and sprinted to the SUV. Naomi did not run. She walked with fast, decisive strides, the pace of someone accustomed to the tempo of emergencies. Evan half ran, half stumbled to keep up. When the SUV door shut, the police activated their sirens instantly. The convoy blasted through the airport security gate, veering onto a dark road and launching into the city traffic like a spear of light cutting through the night. Naomi sat in the back seat, eyes locked on the ETA on her phone. 19 minutes. Evan watched the city blur past, street lamps, signs, silhouettes all stretched into streaks of gold and white. Up ahead, the police used loudspeakers. Emergency medical transport, clear the road immediately. Cars parted like they were being pushed by invisible force, scattering to the sides as the convoy sliced through. Evan felt his heartbeat sinking with the pulsing sirens. 17 minutes. The SUV braked hard at a clogged intersection. The officers jumped out, whistles shrieking as they waved, shouted, and physically pulled traffic aside. Naomi placed a hand on the front seat, her voice cold as steel. "Do not stop," the driver understood. He accelerated, swerving into the bus lane, squeezing the SUV through a gap so narrow Evan thought they would scrape concrete. 14 minutes, Naomi called. "Anita, 14 minutes!" Dr. Sharma's voice cracked on the other end. "Naomi, the patient's oxygen saturation is dropping. She cannot last much longer. We are scrubbed in. All we need is the lungs. You will have them," Naomi said, her tone solid as stone. "Prepare the operating room. 11 minutes." The convoy tore across the Queensboro Bridge, wind buffeting the SUV so hard it rattled. Evan stared down at the East River, dark and cold beneath them. Too calm for a race against death. 8 minutes, each second stretched long and painful. Naomi stared out the window. The hospital lights appeared at last, a white glow among the gold haze of the city. Evan swallowed hard. "We are almost there," he said, though the tremor in his voice made it clear he was trying to comfort himself more than her. Naomi did not respond. 5 minutes. The SUV screeched into the emergency entrance of Mount Sinai. The hospital doors were already open. Inside stood the surgical team, gloves on, gowns, sterile masks in place, lined up like an honor guard, ready to receive life. The door flung open. A technician ran with the container towards the OR. Naomi followed her stride, long and relentless, Evan almost running behind her. The bright hospital lights cast her shadow, long and sharp across the hallway floor, like the blade of a guiding sword. The surgical team stepped aside as she passed. She moved like the calm eye of a hurricane, silent but powerful enough to make everything around her vibrate. At the doors of the operating room, Dr. Sharma appeared, exhaustion carved into her features. Naomi glanced at the lung container, then at Sharma. "Save her." Sharma nodded, unable to speak, and placed a trembling hand on the container as if touching a miracle. The operating room doors shut. A sharp click echoed down the hall. Evan stood beside Naomi, chest heaving like he had run a marathon. "We made it." Naomi didn't look at him. She looked at the closed OR doors. "Not yet," she whispered. "We make it when she breathes." Inside, the surgical lights blazed to life. Outside, Naomi stood motionless, a monument of will and purpose. And in that suspended hallway, time was no longer passing. It was waiting. Waiting for a new breath. Waiting for life. Waiting for the outcome of the battle, Naomi Carter had dragged the sky, the city, and an entire airline into, just to win back a future for a 6-year-old child. The hallway outside the operating room was so silent that Naomi could hear her own heartbeat, each steady but heavy thump, sounding as if it carried the fragile breath of little Eliza Turner on the other side of the door. The red surgical light above the room glowed steadily, a cold yet sacred signal that life was being balanced on the thinnest thread. Evan sank onto the bench against the wall, fingers interlaced elbows resting on his knees. Sweat soaked through the back of his shirt, despite the cold hospital air. Marcus stood farther away, leaning into the wall, his eyes still tense after the hours spent keeping the lung container alive. But Naomi, she did not sit. She did not lean. She did not glance at anyone. She stood straight, hands at her sides, eyes fixed on the operating room door, as if she could pierce through steel and witness every movement of Dr. Sharma's hands. Her entire life had been built on controlling variables, schedules, timelines, processes, technology, people. But right now, in this moment, she controlled nothing. Everything rested in the gloved hands of the surgical team inside. It was the one part of the mission Naomi Carter could not carry herself. And because of that, it was the only part that made her feel vulnerable. Evan glanced at her. "Dr. Carter, you should rest. Drink some water. Sit for a moment." Naomi did not turn her head. "I will rest when the girl can breathe." Evan opened his mouth, then closed it again. No one could argue with that promise. 24 minutes passed, 42 minutes, 1 hour. Time began to distort for Evan, stretching and folding, heavy with worry, pressing like a stone in his gut. Naomi had not moved even a centimeter. Then suddenly the phone in her pocket vibrated. One vibration, brief and steady, not urgent, not fragmented. A signal Naomi had heard thousands of times in her career, but this time it was not a warning, not a request, not a problem. It was an answer. Naomi pulled the phone from her pocket. The screen light illuminated her face, carving her features into something delicate but iron strong. A message from Daniel Lee. The first 3 words made her world stop. "She is breathing." Evan shot up from the bench. Oh my God, is that Naomi did not answer. She opened the full message. "The girl is breathing. Surgery successful. Oxygen levels stable. Dr. Sharma says thank you." In that moment, Naomi closed her eyes. Not to cry, not to celebrate, but to finally release the tension that had been wound tight in her chest for hours. Her exhale was long and deep, as if she had just lowered a massive stone into the depths of the ocean. Evan watched her, seeing for the first time her shoulders drop slightly, as though the weight of an entire world had finally lifted. Naomi opened her eyes. They did not shine with triumph, nor pride, nor excitement. They shone with one thing alone: life. "The child is breathing," she whispered, as if saying it to herself. Evan covered his face with one hand, tears slipping quietly through his fingers. He had never been part of a mission where the outcome mattered this much. Marcus exhaled sharply and leaned harder into the wall, his legs finally giving way after a battle he had never fully trained for. At that moment, the operating room door cracked open, and a flood of white surgical light spilled into the hallway. Dr. Sharma stepped out, exhaustion etched across her features, but her eyes bright with relief. She removed her mask, revealing a smile Naomi would remember for a very long time. "She is stable," Sharma said. "The lungs are functioning beautifully. Oxygen levels are strong. We just completed the final response test. Naomi, we did it. Naomi did not embrace anyone. She did not laugh. She did not cry. She simply tilted her head and nodded, once a small gesture carrying the weight of an entire war. "Thank you," Naomi said. Sharma stepped closer and touched Naomi's arm gently. "No, Naomi. Do not thank me." She looked into Naomi's eyes and spoke with quiet certainty. "Thank you for refusing to compromise." Naomi knew it was true. She understood that her decision had dragged hundreds of people into motion, had sent an airline into freefall, had shaken thousands of shareholders, had cost several employees their jobs, and had forced an entire system to confront its own flaws. She knew the stakes, and she did it anyway. Evan looked at her with awe. "Dr. Carter, you saved her." Naomi shook her head. "No, the surgical team saved her." She lifted her gaze, eyes deep as dark water. "I simply refused to let someone else's mistake kill a child." The words settled into Evan like a vow carved into stone. Sharma gave one last nod before heading back to the recovery wing. "Come meet her mother," she said, with a soft smile. "She wants to thank Naomi Carter in person." Naomi paused, not because she feared meeting a parent, but because she had never been comfortable with gratitude. She was familiar with responsibility, with pressure, with carrying the world without expecting thanks. But she nodded. Evan walked beside her as they moved down the hallway. At the end of the long corridor, a woman stood, waiting, thin, exhausted eyes, swollen from sleepless nights and too many tears. But when she saw Naomi, she raised a hand to her mouth, and fresh tears spilled out this time from relief. "Dr. Carter," her voice cracked. Naomi stopped in front of her. "My daughter." The woman breathed. She is breathing." Naomi nodded. "The lungs were a match. The surgery succeeded. Your daughter will grow up." The woman broke down, covering her face, then stepped forward, as if to embrace Naomi, but held herself back at the last second, afraid to cross a boundary. Naomi gently placed a hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture more meaningful than any speech. "You owe me nothing," Naomi said. "We each did our part." The mother shook her head. "No, without you." Naomi did not deflect the gratitude. She simply held the woman's gaze for a long, quiet moment, accepting the weight of her words. Then she said the only thing she truly believed. "I did what was right," Naomi said. "Nothing more. Nothing less." A little later, Naomi stood at the window of the recovery room. Inside, Eliza Turner lay sleeping, her small chest rising and falling, with steady breaths, the monitor tracing her oxygen levels like a gentle lullaby. Evan stood beside her and whispered, "Look, she is really breathing." Naomi watched for a long time, so long that Evan wondered whether she realized she was holding her own breath. Then slowly she exhaled, not because she was exhausted, not because she was relieved, but because that tiny chest was doing the one thing Naomi had fought all night for it to do: breathe on its own. When they left the hospital, the New York night seemed quieter than usual, as if the whole city were bowing its head to that small but sacred victory. Evan walked a few steps behind Naomi, watching her silhouette ordinary, in a grey hoodie, yet powerful beyond measure. A woman who had been pushed out of the priority line. A woman called Honey. A woman judged by her joggers. But that same woman, silent, calm, relentless, had brought an airline to its knees, shaken a market, forced hundreds to confront themselves, all to save one life. As Naomi pushed open the glass doors and stepped into the night air, a breeze lifted her hair. Evan looked at her. and understood something simple but profound. Real power did not come from the chair she sat in or the aircraft she commanded. It came from her refusal to allow even the smallest disrespect to endanger the life of a child. It was the kind of power only those who understand the value of a single breath can possess. Naomi paused on the hospital steps. She looked up at the New York night sky, not seeking answers, but confirming to herself that the battle was over. Then she said softly, but clearly enough for Evan to hear, "A child breathed." She turned and descended the steps. Evan followed. And as they disappeared into the city's darkness, the story born from a single honey, spoken to the wrong woman in a hoodie, began spreading across the aviation industry like a quiet but unstoppable wind. A lesson? A warning? A reminder respect is not a privilege. It is the basic condition for a world that does not lose its humanity. And that night, as little Eliza Turner slept peacefully for the first time in months, the heart of the story breathed along with her. No one else heard it. But Naomi did. And she knew so long as that breath existed, everything she had done was worth it. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and professional ethics, Naomi Carter's story is not merely an airport incident, but a painful and honest reminder that we never truly know who we are standing in front of, and that a single moment of disrespect can create consequences far beyond anything we can imagine. In a world where procedures, contracts, and technology are constantly prioritized, the deciding factor between success and failure often comes down to how one human being treats another. Naomi shows us that real power does not need to be loud. It lives in composure, in the ability to see the risks hidden beneath the smallest behaviors, and in the refusal to compromise when another person's life is what is at stake. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you reflect on how we treat one another, on fairness, respect, and the value of a single breath, then like this video to help spread that message to even more people. And if you want to continue following the journeys where kindness, courage, and true responsibility are brought into the light, do not forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Before you go, leave a comment with the phrase, "Respect first," as a reminder that every system, every organization, and every right decision begins with exactly that.